These next three slides show the new pathway beginning to gain amplitude by using CAVP. Because of how much horsepower it takes to run the audio and visual processing centers of the brain, by using these techniques we can literally load these new pathways at 100 times the speed of loading them with just thought alone. Another way of saying this is that listening to an audio and or watching a video creates exponentially greater growth in numbers of new synapses in the brain. In the world of brain function, the pathway with the greatest number of synapses is the one that ultimately gets the nod. Malcolm Gladwell, in his book Outliers, suggests that it takes about 10,000 hours of practice to become a phenomenon at something. Fortunately, it doesn't take 10,000 hours of repetition to change a thought, but it can take roughly 10,000 strokes. But before you get too freaked out about that number, consider this. A practice stroke equals one thought in this case. And if we can put 10 thoughts on a 1-minute videotape, which you can easily do, then 1 minute of video equals 10 practice strokes. And if you watch that video for 10 times every day, that's a mere 10 minutes. That adds up to 100 strokes per day. So, if you watch 10 minutes worth of video every day for roughly 100 days, you arrive at 10,000 practice strokes. It's really about 3.5 months. Is that really that big of a price to pay? I can virtually guarantee that 10 minutes of practice watching a videotape with 10 perfected, mutually exclusive thoughts times 100 days will absolutely change the way you think. Now, if you don't believe that to be true, then I invite you to take the challenge. I've never had a client ever come back to me after 100 days and say, you know, I listened to these thoughts 10 times a day for 100 days and it did nothing. If that happens to you, you will be the first. But I don't hold out much hope for that happening. Like most of my clients, you will say instead, this changes everything. I've only had 2 responses to this challenge. Those who take the challenge and are amazed, and those who don't. This slide represents approximately 10,000 repetitions. New information being processed by the brain is becoming now equally likely to travel down either pathway. At this point, I'm equally likely to think I don't care as to think I do care. I care a lot. Of course, we're not done at this point, but this is a significant change in thinking. At this point, you're looking at that box of donuts, and you hear your brain launching those old default thoughts. Who cares? It just doesn't matter. Go ahead, eat one. And then you distinctly, loud and clear, hear that second set of thoughts. Wait a minute. I care. It does matter. It matters tremendously. Walk away. Feel good about exercising self-discipline. Do that right now. This will feel a whole lot better than the donut would taste. And this, my friend, is a pretty cool place to be. On this slide is where the magic happens. At this point, the new thought process, or perspective, has officially taken over, and the old default is slowly fading away. The new way of thinking has become slightly more dominant, meaning that the brain will default to the new way of thinking more often than the old. We've literally created a new default. Now, synapses are fairly stable, but by no means permanent. We observe this in skeletal muscle. It's called atrophy or pruning. Our brains follow that same use it or lose it strategy. Just like muscle tissue, the brain borrows neuropeptides from the unused pathways and recycles those unused chemicals. It literally borrows the hardware from the old circuit to build the new one. Now, we're still likely to hear the old default thoughts now and again trying to launch, but they will simply not have enough strength, enough impulse to influence our behavior. How do we know the brain can do this? Well, we can observe it. In someone who is sighted or has had their sight before and now has become blind, the neurons that formerly powered the eyes get recruited to power the fingertips. This happens naturally when a blind person begins to read Braille. And we can use the very same mechanism to recruit the I don't care neurons to power the new message, I do care. I care a lot. So now we're really getting somewhere. The more we fire the red circuit by watching our videotapes, the more we weaken the yellow circuit. At this stage, we're far more likely to walk away from the box of donuts because it has become relatively easy to pay attention to the thinking that supports self-control and sticking to our intentions. But the yellow circuit is not gone completely. The temptation to just go ahead and eat the donut still fires off in the brain now and again, and there will be times when we do just go ahead and do it, but they will be relatively few. I like to think of this as improving my batting average. I'm never going to bat 100%, and I have to keep practicing if I want to maintain my skills and keep getting better. Whether it's hitting a baseball or eating properly, they both require practice. This final slide represents the transformation into the world of thinking correctly about eating. The yellow circuit, the one housing our old default pathway of thinking, has faded to just a mere whisper. What once dominated our thinking now has very little influence on our behavior. This configuration in the brain is manifested by a high degree of self-control. The donuts still look good and they still smell good, but rarely do we give in. Walking away is just what we do now. Now, how long does it take to get to this point? Well, if statistics are any indicator, and I believe they are, it can take 5 years to get to this point. The statistics I'm referring to are those that come from weight loss studies. Legitimate weight loss is usually referred to as those who have lost weight and kept it off for 5 years. 5 years seems to be that threshold that signifies a permanent change in behavior. So, although we can reach an initial threshold in 100 days, it's most advisable to continue with regular practice strokes for at least 5 years. I like to think of these practice strokes as paying my insurance premiums. I want to insure my efforts, so I continue paying my premiums. So there you have it. My neurobiology of change presentation, how change really happens at the cellular level in the brain. It answers the questions, why do we keep doing the things that we don't want to do, even though we know better? And more importantly, how do I make myself do the things that I want to be doing? If we don't know the facts about the brain, how it makes decisions, what it pays attention to and what it doesn't, we're going to be forever frustrated, trying to do something that the brain simply cannot do. I don't know anything more frustrating than trying to do something thinking it is possible when in fact it isn't, and not knowing that it really cannot be done. What I'm talking about here is trying to short-circuit a neural pathway with logic. It simply cannot be done. The only solution is to build a brand new circuit, 180 degrees out of phase with the old one, and then amplify this new circuit until it eclipses the old circuit in size and strength. There's simply no way around it. And CAVP is the most efficient way to make this happen. I used to think that change was hard, but I don't anymore. I now think that change is damn near impossible, which is really far more accurate. The brain is built to resist change at every corner, and for good reason. So without a firm working knowledge of cerebral properties like neuroplasticity, and a mighty powerful way to leverage these new pathways, like CAVP, we will remain stuck, frustrated, and bewildered, wondering why we can know better and still continue to shove the cheeseburgers in our face. As a final note on this segment, I encourage you wholeheartedly to give CAVP a try. It is most common that the folks I talk to get a little weirded out by the thought of seeing themselves on videotape or even hearing themselves on audio tape. But I can assure you that the weirdness of watching yourself or listening to yourself on tape will quickly give way to the awesome power of lighting up your entire cerebral cortex and making it work for you instead of against you. I guarantee that your world will never be the same again. You will become one of those people you have always been envious of. You know, those people who live their lives exactly in accordance with what they want to be doing. And it feels pretty cool to have people come up to you and ask, okay, so what's your secret? And you know what? It's a fun secret to share.